Have you ever looked at a coin and thought, why does this even exist? Throughout history, empires and governments have minted coins for every reason imaginable: trade, pride, necessity, and occasionally pure chaos. But every so often, they produce something so strange, so impractical, or just flat out ridiculous that it makes you question what they were even thinking. In this episode, we're digging into 7 of the most absurd coin denominations ever minted, from an Australian coin with a hole punched straight through it, and a Yemeni coin so tiny it could disappear between your fingertips. And just wait until you get to number 3, a coin so confusing and controversial, the US practically canceled it within 3 years of release. If you think your history teacher skipped the weirdest parts of the past, you're probably right. Smash that like button and get ready to explore the bizarre side of money they never told you about. Starting our countdown at number 7, we travel to colonial New South Wales, where a desperate governor solved a currency crisis by literally punching holes through perfectly good silver coins. In 1813, Governor Lachlan Macquarie faced a dire financial problem. The British had sent ships full of convicts to Australia, but hadn't provided a stable or sufficient currency system. Spanish silver dollars, known as pieces of 8, were in circulation, but they kept leaving the colony on outbound ships, often used in trade with other ports. That left New South Wales constantly short on hard money. Macquarie's solution was as bold as it was bizarre. He acquired 40,000 Spanish dollars and ordered William Henschel, a convicted forger turned government engraver, to punch holes in the center of each coin. This created 2 new coins from one. The outer ring became the holy dollar, revalued at 5 shillings. The inner circle became the dump, valued at 15 pence. This wasn't just creative accounting. It was economic strategy disguised as madness. By mutilating the coins, Macquarie made them unusable outside New South Wales, ensuring they stayed within the colony's economy. And in doing so, he created the first uniquely Australian currency. The process was more refined than it sounds. Henschel used specially made dies and presses to produce clean, uniform holes and to overstamp both pieces with local markings. The holy dollar, New South Wales 1813, and 5 shillings. The dump, New South Wales 1813, 15 pence, and a crown emblem. Here's the absurd part. The math didn't quite check out. A full Spanish dollar was worth about 5 shillings, yet Macquarie's split coins totaled 6 shillings and 3 pence combined. In effect, the colony had inflated its money supply by about 25% simply by punching holes in it. Despite the odd math, the system worked, and it worked well. The holy dollar and dump circulated successfully until 1829, when the British finally sent sufficient official currency and recalled the modified coins. Today, these relics are considered national treasures. Collections like those at Museums Victoria and the National Museum of Australia highlight their importance. According to the Dayton Kettering Coin Club, the holy dollar remains a key piece in numismatic history, with surviving examples fetching hundreds of thousands of dollars at auction. What began as a desperate improvisation became one of the most innovative monetary experiments in history. And the irony? Coins that were literally broken became lasting symbols of Australian ingenuity and independence. At number 6, we encounter an American coin that became legendary not for what it was supposed to be, but for what went hilariously wrong during production. The 1937 D3-legged Buffalo nickel exists because someone at the Denver Mint had a very bad day. The Buffalo nickel series was nearing its end, having circulated since 1913, but the dies were wearing out faster than expected. When one particular die started showing excessive wear on the buffalo's front right leg, a mint worker decided to fix the problem with some aggressive polishing. That fix turned into numismatic history. According to PCGS documentation, the worker polished so enthusiastically that he completely removed the buffalo's front leg from the die, creating coins that showed a 3-legged buffalo, a creature that definitely shouldn't exist in nature or on American currency. But here's what makes this error particularly ridiculous. Nobody caught it immediately. The Denver Mint continued striking coins with the 3-legged die for weeks, producing thousands of defective nickels before someone finally noticed that American buffalo had somehow evolved to lose a leg. Coin Week analysis reveals that the mint's response was swift. They retired the damaged die and returned to normal four-legged buffalo production. But by then, an estimated 10,000 to 15,000 three-legged nickels had already entered circulation, creating an instant collectible that was both absurd and valuable. Collectors immediately recognized the humor and rarity of the three-legged buffalo. Here was an official US coin that depicted an anatomically impossible animal, created by accident, and released by a mint that apparently didn't notice they were producing disabled wildlife currency. The market response was enthusiastic. Littleton coin documentation shows how three-legged buffalo nickels quickly became one of the most sought-after error coins in American numismatics, with values reaching several $1,000s for high-grade examples. Collectors weren't just buying a mistake, they were buying the story of institutional incompetence that created something uniquely American. Today, the 1937 D3-legged buffalo nickel represents the perfect intersection of human error and collecting enthusiasm. It proves that sometimes the most valuable coins are the ones that show exactly how things can go wrong, and how those mistakes can become more interesting than anything that goes right. The three-legged buffalo stands as a permanent reminder that even the US Mint, with all its precision and quality control, can occasionally produce something so absurd it becomes legendary. Halfway through our countdown, we reach the coin that answers our opening question, the US 20-cent piece, a denomination so confusing and controversial that it triggered national outrage and got scrapped faster than almost any coin in American history. The 20-cent piece was born from what seemed like sound logic. By 1875, the US had dimes and quarters, but no convenient way to make change in a time when small denomination coins were in short supply, especially in the American West. Mint Director Henry Linderman persuaded Congress that a 20-cent coin would improve commercial transactions, making it easier for merchants to give exact change without relying so heavily on fractional currency or foreign silver coins like Spanish 2 bits. What could go wrong with such reasonable logic? Everything, as it turns out. According to numismatic news and official mint records, the fatal flaw was visual. The 20-cent piece looked nearly identical to the quarter. Both were made of silver. Both were just 2 millimeters different in diameter. Both featured Lady Liberty on the obverse and an eagle on the reverse. Both had reeded edges, common on silver coins of the era. In dim lighting or fast-paced transactions, people simply couldn't tell them apart. Merchants mistook 20-cent coins for quarters, unintentionally shortchanging customers. Customers passed off 20-cent pieces as quarters, gaining a 5-cent advantage. As Coin Week and Littleton Coin Company note, this led to widespread confusion in shops, banks, and post offices. Public backlash was swift. Newspapers published complaints from shopkeepers, bankers, and customers, calling the coin impractical and annoying. According to accurate PMR and numismatic news, some merchants even refused to accept it altogether. Congress responded quickly. The coin was only minted for circulation in 1875 and 1876, primarily at the Philadelphia, Carson City, and San Francisco mints. By 1877, only proof coins were struck, with just 600 examples produced in 1877, and an even smaller 600 again in 1878. Solely for collectors. After that, the denomination was permanently discontinued. The 20-cent piece is now remembered as a cautionary tale, a classic case of bureaucratic logic clashing with real-world usage. On paper, the coin made perfect sense. In practice, it caused such confusion that it became almost unusable. Ironically, the coin's failure is what gives it value today. Once a nuisance in people's pockets, now a collector's prize. High-grade examples, especially from 1876 Carson City or the ultra-rare proof issues, can fetch thousands of dollars, a strange fate for a coin that nobody wanted at the time. Fourth on our list, we venture into Eastern Europe to meet the Tympf, a coin with a name that sounds like a medical condition and a value system so complicated that even experienced money changers needed calculators. The Tympf emerged from the monetary chaos of 17th century Poland-Lithuania, one of Europe's largest and most politically complex kingdoms. with territory stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. The Commonwealth needed a unified currency system, but what they created instead was the Tympf, a denomination that defied logic and tested everyone's mathematical skills. The name itself adds to the absurdity. Tympf comes from the German word meaning a small drum, presumably because the coin made a distinctive sound when dropped, in an era when testing coin authenticity by sound was crucial. Naming a coin after a percussion instrument was either brilliant marketing or complete coincidence. What made the Tympf particularly ridiculous was its international ambitions. Prussia, Brandenburg, and other German states began minting their own versions, each with slightly different specifications, exchange rates, and regional variations. Premium Polish coin auction records document how dozens of different Tympfs circulated across Central Europe, all supposedly equivalent but actually varying significantly in value. The practical problems were immediate and ongoing. Merchants needed conversion charts to do business across regional boundaries. Travelers carried multiple types of Tympfs because what worked in Warsaw might be rejected in Berlin. The supposed simplification of having a standard denomination actually created more complexity than the previous chaos. The Tympf system limped along for over a century, from 1663 to 1765, largely because nobody could agree on what should replace it. Various rulers attempted monetary reforms, but the Tympf proved remarkably resistant to extinction, continuing to circulate even when newer, more logical denominations were introduced. Eventually, the Tympf disappeared not through official decree, but through practical abandonment. As trade became more international and monetary systems modernized, the overly complicated Tympf simply became too difficult to use, fading away as merchants chose simpler alternatives. Today, Tympfs are prized by collectors precisely because they represent monetary chaos at its finest. These coins prove that sometimes the most complicated solutions are the most absurd, and that naming your money after musical instruments probably isn't the best long-term strategy. Now at number 3, we encounter America's most pointless denomination, the 3-cent piece, a coin so small and impractical that the US Mint created 2 different versions, neither of which made any logical sense. The 3-cent story begins in 1851 with the silver trime. Yes, that's actually what they called it. According to US Mint historical records, the trime was created to help people buy 3-cent postage stamps without needing to break larger denominations. The logic seemed sound. Create a coin that matches the price of stamps, and postal transactions become easier. What they created instead was a coin so tiny that people constantly lost it. Littleton coin documentation shows how the silver 3-cent piece measured just 14 millimeters in diameter, making it smaller than a modern dime. In 1865, the US Mint decided that one 3-cent coin wasn't enough, so they created a second version, the 3-cent nickel. NGC price guide records show how this new version was slightly larger, made of different metal, and had a completely different design, but served the exact same pointless function as the silver version. Now America had 2 3-cent coins circulating simultaneously, both solving a problem that didn't really exist, both causing confusion that definitely did exist. Wikipedia documentation reveals how merchants, customers, and banks struggled to keep track of which 3-cent piece was which, and whether the different metals meant different values. The practical problems were immediate and ongoing. The silver trimes were so small that they disappeared into pockets, fell through coin-counting equipment, and got mistaken for foreign coins. The 3-cent nickels were larger but had an odd shield design that looked nothing like other American coins, confusing anyone who wasn't familiar with the denomination. But here's what made the 3-cent pieces truly absurd. They never solved the postal problem they were designed for. Postage stamp prices changed regularly, but the 3-cent coins remained the same value, meaning they quickly became useless for their original purpose, while remaining inconvenient for everything else. The US Mint's learning curve was painfully slow. Blog documentation from Littleton Coin shows how they continued minting both versions for decades, the silver trime from 1851 to 1873, and the 3-cent nickel from 1865 to 1889. That's nearly 4 decades of producing coins that served no practical purpose. The market spoke clearly about these denominations. Both 3-cent pieces had low circulation numbers, not because they were rare, but because people avoided using them. Why struggle with tiny, confusing coins when nickels and dimes worked perfectly well for small transactions? Eventually, common sense prevailed, and both 3-cent denominations were discontinued. The silver trime disappeared in 1873, followed by the 3-cent nickel in 1889, ending one of the most pointless experiments in American numismatic history. Today, 3-cent pieces are valuable to collectors precisely because they represent bureaucratic thinking at its most disconnected from reality. These coins prove that sometimes the solution to a simple problem, like buying stamps, can be far more complicated than the original problem, and that creating 2 different solutions to the same non-problem is twice as absurd as creating one. Second on our list, we travel to Yemen to discover coins so impossibly small that they could literally disappear between your fingertips, yet somehow remained official currency for 7 years. The Sana'a fractional rial coins represent perhaps history's most impractical approach to small change. In 1949, the Mutawakkilite Kingdom of Yemen decided that their monetary system needed more precision, so they created coins worth 1/8 and 1/16 of a rial, denominations so tiny that handling them required almost surgical precision. Numista catalog records reveal the staggering absurdity of these coins' specifications. The 1/8 rial measured approximately 11 millimeters in diameter, while the 1/16 rial was even smaller at roughly 9 millimeters. To put this in perspective, these coins were smaller than most shirt buttons, tinier than a standard pencil eraser, and so diminutive that dropping one on anything but a perfectly smooth surface meant it was gone forever. But size wasn't the only problem. Ucoin documentation shows how the fractional rials featured intricate Arabic calligraphy and detailed designs that were virtually impossible to read without magnification. The coins displayed the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith, but the text was so small that most people couldn't verify they were holding genuine currency rather than decorative beads. The practical challenges were immediate and overwhelming. Merchants needed tweezers or specialized tools to handle transactions involving these coins. Customers squinted at purchases trying to count change that could hide under a fingernail. Market transactions became exercises in microscopic examination rather than efficient commerce. Elemental historical records document how the fractional rials created chaos in Yemen's markets. Vendors struggled to make change for small purchases. Customers lost coins before completing transactions, and the entire commercial system slowed down as everyone involved had to peer closely at tiny pieces of metal to determine their value. The 1/16 rial was particularly ridiculous, representing such a small fraction of buying power that it took dozens of coins to purchase anything meaningful. Imagine trying to buy bread with coins so small you needed magnification to count them, or attempting to store your money in pouches designed for normal-sized currency. Weather became an enemy of commerce. Wind could blow fractional rials away during outdoor transactions. Rain made the tiny coins slippery and even harder to handle. Sand, common in Yemen, could bury the coins so completely that they became invisible against the ground. The Mutawakkilite Kingdom maintained these impractical denominations from 1949 to 1956. 7 years of commercial frustration that tested the patience of every merchant and customer in Yemen. Numista records show how the fractional rials were eventually abandoned, not through official decree, but through practical impossibility. Today, surviving examples of Yemen's fractional rials are prized by collectors precisely because they represent the extreme limits of coin practicality. These pieces prove that while precision in monetary systems might seem logical on paper, there's a point where precision becomes so extreme that it defeats the purpose of having currency at all. The Sana'a fractional rials stand as monuments to the principle that just because you can make something smaller doesn't mean you should, and that sometimes the most technically impressive solutions are the most practically useless. Last but not least, we reach the most audacious entry on our countdown, the Mormon gold coins of Utah Territory, where a religious community decided to create their own currency, ignore federal authority, and somehow get away with it for over a decade. The Mormon gold coinage began in 1848 when members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, having fled to Utah Territory to escape religious persecution, discovered they had a practical problem. They had gold from California, but no official U.S. mint to convert it into usable currency. Their solution was characteristically bold: create their own coins and dare the federal government to stop them. Wikipedia documentation reveals the scope of their operation. Between 1848 and 1860, the Mormons produced gold coins in denominations of $2.50, $5, $10, and $20, all bearing distinctly non-governmental imagery. Instead of liberty or eagles, these coins featured beehives, clasped hands, and the motto, "Holiness to the Lord," making it clear that this was religious currency for a religious community. But here's what made the Mormon coins truly absurd from a legal standpoint. They were completely unauthorized. The U.S. Constitution gives Congress exclusive power to coin money. Yet here was a religious community in federal territory producing their own currency, stamping it with religious slogans, and using it for everyday commerce as if they were a sovereign nation. U.S. rare coin investments. Historical analysis documents how the Mormon coins created a parallel monetary system in Utah Territory. Local merchants accepted them, church members preferred them to federal currency, and the territorial economy functioned on coins that technically violated federal law with every transaction. What made the situation even more absurd was the federal government's response, or lack thereof. Despite clear constitutional violations, Washington essentially ignored the Mormon coinage for over a decade. The territory was remote, the coins met metallurgical standards, and the federal government had bigger problems than pursuing religious communities who were minting high-quality gold currency. The Mormon gold coins represent perhaps the most successful act of monetary rebellion in American history. For 12 years, a religious community operated their own mint, produced their own currency, and maintained their own monetary system without federal interference, proving that sometimes audacity succeeds where caution fails. Eventually, federal pressure and the establishment of official mints in the West ended the Mormon coinage experiment. But for over a decade, Utah Territory functioned on religious currency that shouldn't have existed, created by people who had no legal authority to make it, accepted by merchants who probably knew better, and ignored by a federal government that chose its battles carefully. Today, Mormon gold coins are among the most valuable pieces of American territorial currency, worth far more than their gold content because they represent the ultimate intersection of religious conviction, monetary necessity, and successful defiance of federal authority. So there you have it, 7 coins that make you wonder what people were thinking. Holes punched through money, 3-legged buffalo, coins so tiny you'd lose them in your couch cushions, and Mormons just deciding to make their own currency because why not? The funny thing is, all these failed coins are now worth serious money to collectors. Turns out the more ridiculous something was, the more people want to own it today. Go figure. From 3-legged buffaloes to holy dollars, these coins are wild. Which one blew your mind the most? Was it the controversial 20-cent piece or the teeny tiny Yemeni rials? Drop your pick in the comments. Let's see which coin reigns as the most ridiculous of them all.